The alley behind the corner market reeked of rotting fruit and spilled oil, a narrow vein of shadow squeezed between crumbling brick walls under the sodium glow of a flickering street lamp. It was just past midnight, in the forgotten outskirts of Milford, where the hum of distant highways faded into the night's indifferent silence. Coleridge Hanley eased his Harley to a stop at the mouth of the alley, the engine's low rumble dying like a sigh. He'd been riding aimless loops since dusk, chasing the ghosts that clung to him like exhaust fumes, memories of a brother lost to the sands of some far-off war, a promise whispered over dog tags that he'd buried deep but never forgotten. At 42, Ridge was all lean muscle and faded ink, his leather vest scarred from rides that tested more than roads. He killed the headlight, letting the bike's warmth seep into his boots when his eyes caught movement in the dimness. There, huddled against an overflowing dumpster, an elderly couple lay curled together on a threadbare blanket, their frail forms swallowed by the trash bags piled around them like indifferent sentinels. The man, silver-haired and gaunt, had his arm draped protectively over the woman, whose white curls peeked from beneath a wool shawl that might have once been elegant. They slept, or seemed to, with the quiet resignation of those who'd long surrendered to the world's edges. No cardboard sign begging for coins, no frantic eyes scanning for threats, just two souls, adrift in the refuse, as if the alley were their chosen hearth. Ridge's gut twisted, a cold knot of outrage rising like bile. In a town where fortunes flipped on a whisper, this wasn't right. No one ended up here by accident, not with the dignity etched in their lined faces. He swung a leg over the saddle, boots crunching on gravel as he approached slow, hands open at his sides. The air hung heavy with the tang of damp cardboard and faint decay, but beneath it, something cleaner. Lavender soap, maybe, clinging to their clothes like a defiant memory. "Hey," Ridge said softly, his voice gravel rough from years of wind and unspoken regrets. "You folks all right?" The man stirred first, eyes fluttering open, sharp and blue despite the weariness. He sat up carefully, shielding the woman as she blinked awake, her gaze steady but shadowed. "We're fine, son," the man replied, his accent carrying a faint lilt from somewhere up north, like old maple and pine. "Just resting. Name's Armand Lavoie, and this is my Vera." She nodded, a small smile cracking her lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. Ridge crouched to their level, pulling a couple of protein bars from his saddlebag, emergency rations from club runs that had seen him through worse nights. "Looks like you could use these. Market's closed, but I got water too." He handed them over, watching as Armand accepted with a nod of quiet pride, no groveling, no shame. As Vera unwrapped the bar with trembling fingers, the silence stretched, broken only by the distant wail of a siren slicing the night. Ridge lingered, something pulling at him, an echo of that old promise to his brother. Look out for the overlooked, stand for the silent. "What brings you out here?" he asked, not prying, just filling the void. Armand glanced at Vera, a wordless exchange passing between them before he spoke. "Life's choices, that's all. We chose this." The words landed flat, too polished, like a rehearsed line from a bad play. Ridge's instincts prickled. He'd seen enough cons in dive bars and border towns to spot the Polish over pain. Vera sipped from the water bottle, her hands steadying as warmth returned to her cheeks. "We had a home once," she murmured, voice soft as falling leaves. "Up in the hills, with a garden and mornings that smelled of fresh bread. But promises, they shift like sand." Armand nodded, his eyes distant, fixed on the alley's mouth where headlights occasionally swept by. Ridge leaned against the wall, the cool brick grounding him. As they unfolded their tale in fragments, whispers of a family business sold off cheap, signatures on papers they barely understood, a slow unraveling that left them with nothing but each other. It sounded clean, too neat, like a story scrubbed of its stains. But as Armand reached into his coat pocket for a handkerchief, an envelope slipped free, yellowed and creased, tumbling onto the blanket. Ridge's eyes locked on it before Armand could snatch it back. "What's that?" he asked, voice low. The old man hesitated, then sighed, picking it up with a defeated slump. "Just old news, deeds and such, from the folks who took what was ours." Vera's hand tightened on his arm, a silent plea, but curiosity burned in Ridge now, hot as engine oil. He took the envelope gently, unfolding papers under the street lamp's harsh light, legal jargon, signatures in looping script, dates from a few years back. Names jumped out. A local firm, Evergreen Holdings, tied to the mayor's brother-in-law. Whispers Ridge had heard in club meets about shady land grabs, but deeper in, a notarized letter hidden like a thorn, testimony from a nurse at the local clinic hinting at coercion, pressure on the elderly to sign away rights under the guise of community aid. The pieces clicked, a quiet thunder in Ridge's chest. This wasn't choice. It was theft, wrapped in smiles and fine print. The couple had been played, their trust weaponized in a system that chewed up the vulnerable and spat out husks. Armand's eyes met his, raw now, the polish cracking. "We didn't want to burden anyone. Thought we could manage." Vera nodded, tears glistening but unshed. "But it's eating us, this secret, like a weight we can't shake." Ridge folded the papers, handing them back, but the fire in him roared to life. A call he hadn't heard in years, echoing his brother's last words, "Honor the broken." He stood, the alley suddenly too small for the injustice swelling inside. "You're not managing alone anymore," he said, voice steady as forged steel. "I've got a crew, folks who ride for what's right. We uncover truths, make sure promises stick." Armand's brow furrowed, hope flickering like a match in wind. "Why us? You don't know us." "Because I've been the fool who signed away pieces of himself," Ridge replied, the admission slipping out like a confession. Scars from his own past, debts unpaid, a marriage shattered by war's shadow flashed in his mind. And because some secrets demand daylight. He helped them to their feet, the blanket folding small in his hands as the first hints of dawn bruised the sky purple. The Harley waited, a faithful beast, and for the first time in months, Ridge felt the pull of purpose, a ride that might redeem more than just these two souls. As they walked toward the bike, Vera's hand on his arm light as a bird's wing, Ridge knew this was no random stop. The secret behind them wasn't just papers. It was a web of quiet corruption, threads leading to power that hid in plain sight, and he, Cole Ridge Hanley, scarred rider of forgotten roads, would unravel it, not with fists or fury, but with the unyielding honor of a promise kept. The engine growled awake, carrying them into the light, where justice waited, patient and fierce. The first rays of dawn clawed over the horizon, painting the empty streets of Milford in strokes of bruised gold and shadow. Ridge guided the Harley slow through the waking town. Armand and Vera perched behind him on the worn leather seat, their frail frames holding tight like roots to weathered stone. The engine's steady thrum vibrated through them all, a heartbeat against the chill morning air that carried the faint scent of dew-kissed asphalt and blooming wildflowers from the roadside ditches. Vera's shawl fluttered like a flag of surrender, while Armand's hand gripped Ridge's shoulder, not out of fear, but a quiet trust blooming in the unexpected ride. Ridge's mind raced ahead, mapping the path to the Iron Promise clubhouse. A squat warehouse on the edge of town, its corrugated walls scarred by years of storms and secrets, a sanctuary for those who'd chosen brotherhood over blood. They pulled up as the sun crested fully, spilling warm light across the gravel lot dotted with bikes like sleeping guardians. The clubhouse door creaked open before Ridge could kill the engine, and out stepped Jack's Forge Harlan, his broad frame filling the frame like a wall of forged iron. At 38, Forge was the club's enforcer in spirit, if not title. His arms a tapestry of tattoos from tours overseas that mirrored Ridge's own ghosts. Behind him trailed Lena Sparks Ruiz, the weirder of the group, her toolkit always slung over one shoulder, eyes sharp as welding torches from nights spent piecing together broken machines and mended lives. The rest of the core crew filtered out, veterans like Tommy Echo Hale, who heard silences louder than shouts, and Mira Haven Cole, a nurse who'd traded scrubs for leathers after losing her own family to the system's cold grip. Ridge dismounted first, offering a hand to Vera, who stepped down with the grace of someone who'd danced through harder falls. "Easy now," he murmured, his voice a low anchor. Armand followed, scanning the group with wary eyes that softened at the sight of faces weathered by their own battles. The air hummed with the scent of fresh coffee brewing inside, mingling with the oily tang of bike chains and the earthy residue of last night's rain. "Folks," Ridge said, gesturing to the couple, "this is Armand and Vera Lavoie. They need us. Got a story that'll twist your guts." The crew formed a loose circle, boots shifting on the gravel, the morning light catching the glint of club patches, faded eagles and crossed wrenches symbolizing promises forged in fire. Forge crossed his arms, his gaze steady but probing. "Ridge, you drag strays home like it's habit. What's the play?" Ridge pulled the yellowed envelope from his vest pocket, the papers crackling like dry leaves as he unfolded them under the open sky. Vera leaned into Armand, her breath shallow, while the group leaned in, the weight of unspoken histories hanging thick. He laid it out plain, voice gravel steady. The alley, the too clean tale of choice, the hidden letter from the nurse at Milford Mercy Clinic, fictional echoes of coercion, where community aid masked pressure tactics, signatures coaxed from trembling hands over lukewarm tea. Names surfaced like buoys in fog. Evergreen Holdings, a shell for land flips that enriched the mayor's inner circle, preying on the elderly with smiles sharper than knives. "They didn't choose this," Ridge finished, eyes locking on Forge. "It was taken. Slow, quiet, like poison in the well." A murmur rippled through the crew, Echo's face darkening as he traced a scar on his knuckles, a reminder of his own brush with crooked vets' aid groups. "Sounds like the same rot that chewed up my old man," he said, voice echoing soft but edged. "Pension vanished, house foreclosed on a technicality. They call it progress." Mira stepped forward, her hands gentle as she touched Vera's arm, feeling the fragility beneath the shawl. "I've seen it in the ER. Folks signing away dignity because they're scared, alone. But you're not alone now." She shot Ridge a look, a silent nod of the chosen family they'd built from fragments. Ex-soldiers, road warriors, healers who'd all answered a call to stand for the silenced. Forge took the papers, squinting at the looping signatures under the strengthening sun. The wind picked up, rustling the edges, carrying the distant rumble of a semi on the highway, a reminder of roads that led away from home or straight into hell. "This ties to Harlan Tate," he growled, the mayor's brother-in-law, a name whispered in backroom deals that the club had skirted before. Evergreen's been snapping up hillside properties, turning farms into condos for city fat cats. If these two were pushed out... He trailed off, handing the envelope to Sparks, who scanned it with a mechanic's precision. "Dates line up with that rezoning push last spring. I can dig digital trails, emails, filings, but we need witnesses, not just paper." Armand cleared his throat, stepping into the circle's heart, his lilt cutting the tension like a knife through fog. "We have one. The nurse, Ilara Voss. She tried to warn us, slipped us that letter before they transferred her out, said it was bigger than us, a pattern." Vera nodded, her eyes meeting Mira's with a spark of shared resolve. "We kept quiet to protect her, but now, maybe it's time." The words hung, a promise cracking open, and Ridge felt the old vow to his brother stir deeper. A legacy of quiet stands against the storm. The crew exchanged glances, the bond tightening like chains on a wheel. Forge clapped Ridge on the back, the impact solid as oath. "We're in. But careful, these threads lead to suits who don't ride. They hire the muscle." Sparks already had her phone out, fingers flying, while Echo fetched chairs from inside, the scent of coffee wafting stronger, a small comfort amid the brewing storm. As Vera settled with the cup, steam curling like secrets unveiled, Ridge watched the group coalesce around the couple, strangers becoming kin in the span of a sunrise. But as the morning wore on, a shadow crept in. A black SUV idling at the lot's edge, tinted windows hiding eyes that watched too long. Ridge's instincts flared, the alley's chill returning despite the warming sun. The web was alive, sensing the pull. Justice wouldn't come easy. It demanded patience, proof, and the unbreaking loyalty of those who'd chosen to ride together. And in that circle, with the horizon stretching wide, Ridge knew the ride had just begun, carrying not just two souls, but the weight of promises that could shatter empires built on lies. The sun climbed higher, turning the clubhouse lot into a patchwork of light and shadow that danced across the gravel like fleeting loyalties. Inside, the air thickened with the aroma of strong coffee and the faint metallic bite of Sparks' laptop humming on the scarred wooden table, its screen casting a blue glow on the faces gathered around. Ridge leaned against the wall, arms crossed over his vest, the weight of the envelope now passed hand to hand like a sacred relic. Armand and Vera sat side by side on mismatched chairs, Vera's fingers laced with her husband's, their presence a quiet anchor amid the crew's rising energy. The room, with its walls lined in faded posters of open roads and shelves cluttered with trophies from rides long past, felt smaller now, charged with the promise of action. Sparks' fingers flew across the keys, her brow furrowed in concentration, the soft clicks echoing like Morse code in the hush. "Got something," she said finally, her voice cutting the tension like a spark from flint. She turned the screen toward the group, revealing a web of digital threads, public filings twisted into private gains. Evergreen Holdings wasn't just a name, it was a hydra. Tentacles reaching into Milford's underbelly, snapping up properties under the banner of urban renewal. Dates aligned with Armand and Vera's story, a cluster of sales from the hillside homes, all to elderly owners who'd signed away their legacies in dimly lit offices, lured by promises of security that dissolved like mist. "See this?" Sparks pointed to a blurred email chain, redacted but telling. "Internal notes from Tate's office. Pressure on notaries to rush approvals. No outright threats, but the implications there, heavy as lead." Forge paced the room's edge, his boots thudding softly on the concrete floor, each step a drumbeat of restrained fury. His eyes, shadowed by the brim of his cap, flicked to the window where the black SUV had lingered earlier, now vanished like a bad omen into the morning traffic. "Tate's no stranger to this. Word in the garages is he's got the mayor's ear and the sheriff's blind eye. They dress it up as progress, condos for the young folks, jobs that never come. But it's the old guard getting shoved out, their roots yanked for someone else's profit." He stopped, facing Armand, his broad shoulders easing as if to share the load. "You two aren't the first, won't be the last if we sit idle." Armand's gaze met Forge's, steady as the hills they'd lost, the lines on his face deepening with the weight of years unspoken. "We thought it was our fault, too trusting, too slow to see the shift." The man from Evergreen, smooth as polished stone, came with forms and a handshake, said it was for the best, community first. Vera squeezed his hand, her voice emerging soft but threaded with steel. "He spoke of our garden, how it'd make way for something grand. We signed, believing in the good of it, but the checks bounced, the new owners never came, and suddenly we're adrift. The words hung, evoking the alley's chill, the trash bags as cruel witnesses to a betrayal that whispered rather than shouted. Echo, ever the listener, knelt by Vera's chair, his quiet presence a balm. He'd lost his father to similar shadows, a veteran's pension siphoned by fine print fees from so-called aid groups. And the echo of that pain resonated in his nod. "Stories like yours echo louder than you know," he said, voice low and resonant like wind through canyon walls. "I've got contacts from the old days, folks in the clinics, the halls of power who owe me silence is kept. Ilara Voss. I can reach out, quiet-like, see if she's willing to speak." Mira, beside him, nodded, her nurse's instincts sharpening as she noted the faint tremor in Vera's hands. Not just age, but the residue of stress that lingered like smoke. "I'll go with you," she offered. "Medical angle could tie in, records of visits where pressure was applied under the guise of care. I've seen charts scrubbed, but traces remain." Ridge watched it all unfold, the crew weaving into a tapestry of purpose, each thread a vow renewed. The old promise to his brother stirred deeper now, not just a ghost but a guiding light, illuminating the scars that bound them. Forges tours in dusty conflicts, sparks escape from a corporate cage that valued numbers over lives, Echo's silent vigils for the forgotten. This was family chosen, forged in the fire of shared roads and unspoken oaths. He stepped forward, the floorboards creaking under his weight, and placed a hand on Armand's shoulder. "We're not charging in blind. Patience first. Gather the proofs. Line up the witnesses. Then we ride to the light, make sure the truth sees daylight." The group murmured agreement, the air shifting from tension to resolve, like the calm before a long haul. Sparks printed copies of the filings, the printer's whir a mechanical heartbeat, while Forge sketched a loose plan on a napkin, discreet meets, back channels, no flags raised too soon. Outside, the sun beat down warmer, baking the gravel and carrying the scent of pine from the distant hills, a reminder of what had been stolen. Vera stood slowly, Mira at her side, and crossed to the window, peering at the empty lot. "It's more than land," she whispered almost to herself. "It's the promises we made, to each other, to the life we built. Seeing it crumble, it hollows you." As noon approached, the crew broke for a simple meal, sandwiches from the clubhouse fridge, shared around the table with stories traded like currency. Laughter edged in. Tentative at first, Armand recounting a tale from their early days, Vera's eyes lighting with the memory of fresh-baked mornings. Ridge caught Forge's eye across the room, a silent pact sealed in that glance. This fight was theirs, a stand against the corrosion that ate at the world's edges. But as they ate, a low rumble grew from the highway, a convoy of semis, oblivious to the undercurrents below. Ridge's thoughts turned to the web's heart, Tate and his allies, power insulated by layers of denial. By afternoon, Echo and Mira slipped out on Echo's bike, the engine fading into the haze, bound for Voss's last known spot, a quiet suburb clinic where truths might still breathe. Sparks dove deeper into the digital shadows, uncovering a pattern, a dozen families displaced, all threads leading back to Evergreen. Armand and Vera rested in a back room, the couple's soft voices murmuring through the walls, rebuilding strength in the safety of walls that held. Forge pulled Ridge aside, voice gravel low. "This could stir the hive. You ready for the sting?" Ridge nodded, the fire in his chest steady. For them, for the promise, always. The day wore on, the clubhouse a hive of quiet industry, justice taking shape not in thunder, but in the patient grind of gears turning toward reckoning. Yet as shadows lengthened, Ridge couldn't shake the alley's echo, the secret that had drawn him in, now pulling the crew into its depths. The ride ahead promised trials, But in the bond they'd chosen, there was unyielding light, a legacy of honor that no corruption could dim. The afternoon sun slanted through the clubhouse windows, casting long fingers of gold across the cluttered table where Sparks hunched over her laptop, the screen's glow etching shadows under her eyes like war paint. The air inside carried the mingled scents of cooling coffee grounds and the faint ozone tang of electronics straining against digital walls, a quiet battlefield where truths hid in code and forgotten files. Ridge paced the room's perimeter, his boots scuffing softly against the worn linoleum, each step echoing the restless churn in his gut. The envelope lay open now, its papers splayed like dissected secrets, annotated with Sparks' neat underlines, names, dates, connections that snaked toward the heart of Milford's shadowed power. Armand and Vera had retreated to the back room for a nap, their soft breathing a fragile rhythm through the thin walls, but the crew remained vigilant, the weight of their choice settling like dust after a storm. Forge leaned against the counter, nursing a bottle of water, his massive frame a pillar of contained energy. "Echo and Mira should be back soon," he said, voice low to avoid carrying. "Voss better have steel in her spine. If she's scared off, we're chasing ghosts." Ridge nodded, pausing to glance at the window where the lot baked empty under the relentless light. No sign of the black SUV, but its memory lingering like exhaust. The old promise to his brother flickered in his mind, stand for the silent, even when the silence screamed. But this felt bigger, a web that could ensnare them all if pulled wrong. He'd ridden through worse, border skirmishes disguised as club runs, debts called in with bullets instead of words. Yet here, in the quiet unraveling of lives like Armand and Vera's, the injustice cut deeper, a slow bleed that no bandage could staunch. Sparks tapped a key, the laptop chiming softly, and the room stilled. "Bingo," she murmured, turning the screen. A grainy photo loaded, an office interior wood-paneled and smug, with a man in a crisp suit shaking hands with an elderly couple whose faces blurred, but postures screamed discomfort. Timestamp: 2 years back, the same month as the Lavoie's signing. This is from a public relations drop, Evergreen's Success Stories, but cross-reference the metadata and it ties to a deleted server log. Tate's firm hosted the event, free consultations that funneled folks straight to the notaries. Her fingers traced the lines, voice gaining edge. Patterns clear. Target the isolated, the trusting, offer help, extract signatures, vanish with the deeds. And the kicker, funds rerouted to a shell for Tate's campaign contributions. It's not just land, it's votes bought with broken homes. The words landed heavy, stirring the air like a gathering thunderhead. Ridge's jaw tightened, the scars on his knuckles whitening as he gripped the table's edge. He'd seen corruption in war zones, where power wore uniforms and lies were ammunition, but this was insidious, preying on the very souls who'd built the town, farmers, retirees, the backbone bent under invisible weights. "How many?" he asked, the question rough as gravel. Sparks scrolled, her expression hardening. At least 15 in the last 3 years, all hillside properties. Some fought back quiet. Letters to papers that got buried, complaints to a sheriff's office that looks the other way. But the Lavoies, their files flagged as resolved amicably, code for swept under. Before Ridge could respond, the back door swung open, admitting Echo and Mira in a rush of hot air and urgency. Echo's face was drawn, his usual calm fractured like cracked pavement, while Mira carried a manila folder clutched to her chest like a shield. The crew converged, the room contracting around them, the scent of road dust clinging to their leathers. "Voss is in," Echo said, sliding into a chair with a sigh that carried miles. "But it's dicey. She's at a small practice now, out of town, transferred after pushing back on some donations that smelled off. Says the pressure wasn't just on patients, it was on staff too. Refuse to play along, and your shifts dry up, your references vanish. Mira set the folder down, opening it to reveal handwritten notes and photocopied charts, the paper crisp, but the content stained with implication. Vera's story checks. Mira continued, her voice steady as a pulse monitor. Voss remembers the visit. Armand had come in for a routine check, mentioned the offer from Evergreen. She overheard the suit in the waiting room, smooth talking about tax relief and community bonds. Slipped them that letter as a warning, but they ignored it, thinking it was just paperwork. Echo leaned in, his eyes distant as if hearing echoes of his father's pleas. She's got more. Audio from a staff meeting, veiled threats about job security if they didn't facilitate the signings. Enough to show intent, not just coincidence. But she wants protection. Tate's reach is long, and she's got a kid to think of. Forge's fist clenched, the bottle in his hand creaking, but he exhaled slow, reining it in. We give it. No one's riding solo on this. The group nodded, the bond tightening like a chain link forged hot. Ridge felt it surge through him. The chosen family, pieced from fractures, Echo's quiet vigils, Mira's healing hands, Spark's digital blade, Forge's unyielding stand. It mirrored the Lavoie's own vow, weathered but unbroken, and his brother's ghost seemed to nod approval from the shadows. Yet doubt crept in, a psychological whisper. What if the web snapped back? Expose Tate, and the sheriff might spin it as biker meddling, turning protectors into pariahs. The ethical tightrope stretched. Justice demanded proof, but proof invited peril. As evening bled into the sky, painting the windows in hues of amber and indigo, Armand and Vera emerged, refreshed but alert, drawn by the murmur of voices. Vera's eyes lit on the folder, a flicker of fear yielding to resolve. Ilara. She risked for us, she said softly, touching the papers like fragile hope. Armand stood beside her, hand on her shoulder. If this brings light, we'll stand in it. Ridge met their gaze, the room's lamplight catching the silver in his stubble. We all will, but tomorrow we move careful. Meet Voss neutral ground, record everything. No loose ends. The crew dispersed into tasks. Sparks encrypting files, Forge checking perimeter with a watchful eye, Echo and Mira prepping questions. Outside, the first stars pricked the dusk. The highways hum a distant lullaby laced with warning. Ridge stepped onto the lot alone, the cooling gravel crunching underfoot, the air rich with pine and fading warmth. The alley's secret had bloomed into a reckoning, pulling them toward a moral crossroads where loyalty clashed with caution. But in the quiet, with the club's lights spilling golden behind him, Ridge recommitted to the promise that had started it all, a ride not for glory, but for the honor of mending what corruption tore asunder. The night deepened, suspense coiling like smoke, as the threads of justice wove tighter, binding fates in the unyielding grip of truth. If this chapter's tension has you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button. It fuels these stories of redemption and helps them roar down more roads. The moon hung low over Milford like a tarnished silver coin, its pale light filtering through the pines that flanked the neutral meeting spot. A forgotten roadside diner on the county line, its neon sign flickering open 24/7 in fits of red and blue. The air outside carried the crisp bite of night chill, laced with the greasy promise of frying bacon from the kitchen vents, a deceptive normalcy against the undercurrent of unease rippling through Ridge's crew. He'd led the ride out here just after dusk, the Harley's engine a low growl that masked the pounding in his chest. Armand and Vera tucked safely back at the clubhouse, under Forge's watchful eye. Now, as the bikes cooled in the gravel lot, their chrome catching moonlight like whispered secrets, Ridge scanned the empty highway. The distant hum of semis, a reminder that roads connected more than places. They wove fates. Inside, the diner smelled of strong tea and worn vinyl booths, the kind that had absorbed 1,000 confessions under fluorescent hum. Echo and Mira had arrived first, claiming a corner table shrouded in shadow, their leathers blending with the dimness like camouflage. Sparks sat across from them, her laptop disguised as a menu planner, fingers hovering over keys, ready to capture every word. Ridge slid into the booth last, the seat creaking under his weight. His vest's patches, a faded eagle clutching a wrench, gleaming faintly. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and a name tag reading Dottie, poured coffee without questions, her presence a brief anchor in the swelling tension. "You folks waiting on someone?" she asked, voice soft as steam rising from the mugs. Mira offered a nod and a smile. "Just catching up. Quiet night." Dottie lingered a beat, as if sensing the weight, then retreated to the counter, leaving the group in their pocket of suspense. The door chime tinkled minutes later, admitting Elara Voss, a woman in her mid-30s, her nurse's scrubs traded for a simple coat that couldn't hide the guarded hunch in her shoulders. Her dark hair was pulled back tight, eyes darting like a deer's in headlights, scanning the room before locking on Echo's subtle wave. She approached slow, the floor's linoleum squeaking under sensible shoes, and slid into the booth opposite Ridge, her hands clasped white-knuckled on the table. The air between them thickened, charged with the ethical precipice they teetered on, truth versus the peril of speaking it. "You Echo?" she whispered, voice barely rising above the diner's low murmur of a lone trucker at the counter. He nodded, his calm a deliberate counterpoint to her nerves. "And this is the team. We appreciate you coming. No names if you don't want. But we're here for the Lavoys, for all of it." Elara's gaze flicked to each face, Mira's empathetic warmth, Sparks' focused intensity, Ridge's steady resolve etched in the lines of his face. Before she exhaled, the sound ragged as tearing fabric. The coffee steamed untouched, its bitter aroma mingling with the faint floral of her perfume, a remnant of hospital shifts that now felt worlds away. "I shouldn't be here," she started, words tumbling like stones down a slope. "After that letter, they watched me." Shift changes that happened to overlap with Tate's visits, questions about patient confidentiality that weren't questions at all. But Armand. He was in my clinic for blood pressure meds, mentioned the evergreen pitch over small talk. The suit waiting outside wasn't there for health tips. He was there to seal deals. Her fingers traced invisible patterns on the table, mapping the psychological maze she'd navigated. Loyalty to her oath clashing with the institutional corruption that demanded silence. Mira leaned in gently, her voice a soothing cadence honed from bedside vigils. "We get it. The system's built to protect itself, not the ones it serves. But those traces you mentioned, staff meetings, the audio, could change that. Show the pattern, the intent behind the smiles." Elara nodded, pulling a slim USB drive from her pocket, sliding it across like contraband. Sparks snatched it seamlessly, plugging it into her laptop under the table's edge, the soft whir of data transfer a heartbeat in the hush. "It's clipped. 10 minutes from a mandatory session last year," Elara said, her tone laced with the dilemma that had kept her awake nights. Tate's rep wasn't speaking, but the message was clear. Facilitate the community partnerships or find work elsewhere. No outright orders, just implications. "Jobs for the town," they said, but I saw the fallout. Patients stressed, homes lost, the quiet despair that fills charts with unexplained ailments. Ridge listened, the diner's clock ticking like a countdown, each second amplifying the moral stakes. His own scars itched, a brother's promise unkept in his mind's eye. The war that had taught him corruption's face wore many masks, from desert camouflage to pinstripe suits. This wasn't bullets and borders, it was a subtler war, psychological barbs that eroded trust like acid on metal. "And the Lavois," he prompted, voice low gravel. Ilara's eyes met his, raw with the weight of withheld truths. They weren't alone. I slipped the letter because I saw the signs. Confusion in their eyes, the way Armand hesitated over the forms during his visit. Tate's network preys on that vulnerability, uses aid programs to isolate, then close in. I've got names of others, folks who signed under similar clouds, but exposing it. "It could drag me down, my daughter. She's 8, asks why mommy's sad at night." The confession hung, a psychological fracture in the booth's confines, the ethical dilemma coiling tighter, justice for the many versus safety for the few. Echo placed a hand near hers, not touching, just offering solidarity from one who'd chosen silence once too often. "We won't let that happen. Protection's part of the ride, discreet, no traces back. You've got our word, like family." Sparks glanced up, the transfer complete, her nod confirming the file's integrity. Audio snippets of veiled directives, logs of coerced consultations, a digital trail that could illuminate the shadows. But as Ilara spoke on, detailing a web of complicit notaries and buried complaints, a flicker outside caught Ridge's eye, the sweep of headlights, slow and deliberate, pulling into the lot. Not a semi, but a sheriff's cruiser, idling with lights off, its silhouette a stark warning against the moonlit gravel. Tension spiked, the group's breaths sinking in silent alert. The cruiser's door opened, a deputy stepping out, his flashlight beam cutting the night like a blade. Routine patrol, or something sharper? Ridge's instincts flared, the promise to stand firm clashing with the caution that had kept his crew alive through darker roads. "Time to wrap," he murmured, signaling Sparks to pocket the drive. Ilara paled, but Mira's steady gaze anchored her. "You've given them a fighting chance. That's redemption in itself." They rose as one, casual as old friends parting, the bell chiming their exit into the cooling night. The deputy lingered, eyes narrowing on the bikes, but said nothing. Yet the encounter sowed doubt, a psychological seed. How deep did the corruption run, if even shadows watched? Back on the highway, engines roaring to life under the star-pricked sky. Ridge led the pack, the USB's weight in his vest a talisman of progress laced with peril. The wind whipped cold, carrying the scent of pine and distant rain as the crew rode toward the clubhouse, dilemmas unresolved but bonds unyielding. Justice demanded more than proof. It required the courage to face the backlash, the moral fortitude to protect the fragile threads of trust. In the rear view's blur, Ridge glimpsed Ilara's taillights fading, her choice a quiet sacrifice echoing his own vow, a legacy of loyalty that burned brighter against the encroaching dark. The night stretched ahead, suspense building like thunder on the horizon, pulling them deeper into the heart of reckoning, where personal redemption intertwined with the greater fight. The clubhouse lights burned late into the night, spilling warm pools across the gravel lot, like defiant beacons against the encroaching dark. Ridge killed his engine first, the Harley's rumble fading into the night's hush, leaving only the tick of cooling metal and the crew's boots crunching in unison as they dismounted. The air hung heavy with the scent of chilled pine and exhaust, a crisp edge that sharpened the tension coiling in Ridge's chest like a spring under pressure. Sparks clutched the USB drive in her fist, her knuckles pale, while Echo and Mira exchanged glances, heavy with the weight of what they'd pulled from the shadows. The sheriff's cruiser lingered in their minds, a silent sentinel on the diner's lot, its watch too pointed to be coincidence. Corruption didn't just hide, it patrolled. Inside, the main room felt fortified, walls lined with maps of old rides now serving as a makeshift warboard, pins marking the web's threads. Evergreen's filings, Tate's connections, the Lavois' lost hillside home. Armand and Vera stirred from their rest in the back, drawn by the low murmur of voices. their faces etched with a mix of hope and the quiet dread that came from years of guarded secrets. Forge met them at the door, his broad frame a reassuring barrier, offering mugs of herbal tea that steamed with chamomile's faint sweetness, a small ritual to steady frayed nerves. "They're back," he said simply, his voice a gravel anchor. "Brought light." Vera's hand found Armand's, their fingers intertwining like roots seeking soil. As the group gathered around the table, the lamplight casting elongated shadows that danced like unspoken fears. Sparks wasted no time, plugging the drive into her laptop with a soft click that echoed in the hush. The screen flickered to life, illuminating her face in stark blues and whites as files unfolded. Audio clips grainy with office echoes, logs of consultations twisted into leverage points. The first recording played low, a voice, smooth and authoritative, droning through a staff briefing at the clinic. "We're all in this for the community," it intoned, laced with the false warmth of a salesman. "Facilitate the partnerships and we all thrive. Hesitate and, well, opportunities pass." No names dropped, no threats spelled out, but the implications slithered through, heavy as unspoken chains. Ridge leaned in, the words stirring the old rage in him, an echo of battlefield briefings where orders masked the cost in blood and broken trust. Ilara's notes accompanied the files, handwritten in tight script, dates of consults where suits from Evergreen shadowed patient visits, forms presented mid-exam like casual afterthoughts. One entry detailed Armand's appointment, the hesitation noted, the suit's presence in the hall like a predator's shadow. "They prey on fatigue," Ilara had written, "the slow erosion of will after a lifetime of giving." Mira read it aloud, her voice steady but threaded with the pain of her own losses, nights in ERs, where the system's indifference turned healing into harm. "This ties the medical angle," she said, tapping the page. "Stress from coercion shows in vitals, elevated pressures, unexplained anxieties. Voss documented it quietly, enough to build a case without alerting the brass." Armand's eyes widened at the mention of his name, the tea mug trembling slightly in his grip. The room's air thickened, carrying the faint must of aged paper and the sharper tang of resolve sharpening like a blade on whetstone. "She saw it," he murmured, voice lilting soft with northern cadence, "when we couldn't. We thought it was kindness, those visits. Free advice, they called it." Vera nodded, her white curls catching the light, tears unshed but glistening like dew on fragile petals. "But it was the beginning of the end. Signed away our garden, our mornings, for promises that crumbled to dust." The confession hung, a psychological rawness exposing the couple's scars, not just financial, but the deeper wound of betrayed trust. The slow poison of realizing one's life had been bartered in whispers. Echo paced to the window, peering into the night where the pines swayed under a rising breeze, their rustle a warning whisper. The cruiser's image burned in his mind, the deputy's beam cutting too close, as if scenting the hunt. "That patrol wasn't random," he said, turning back, his quiet intensity filling the space. "Tate's got eyes everywhere. If they know we're digging, it'll come at us sideways. Visits, warnings, maybe worse." Forge grunted agreement, his fists clenching on the table's edge, the wood creaking under the pressure. He'd faced institutional rot before, in VA halls, where veterans like him were shuffled aside, pensions diluted by red tape. "We hit back smart," he replied. "Compile it all. Voss's audio, Sparks' digital trails, the Lavoie's testimony. Take it to a judge outside Tate's reach, someone clean. No grandstanding, just truth laid bare." Ridge felt the ethical knot tighten, a moral crossroads where loyalty demanded risk. His brother's promise echoed louder now, honor the overlooked, even if it meant staring down the system's jaws. He'd buried that vow under miles of road, but here it resurfaced, binding him to this chosen family. Sparks' unyielding precision, Mira's compassionate steel, Echo's silent vigilance, Forge's unbreakable stand. For Armand and Vera, it was redemption's edge, a chance to reclaim not just land, but the dignity stripped by smiles and signatures. Yet doubt gnawed, exposed the web, and ripples could drown the innocent, like Ilara's child or the couple's fragile peace. "We protect our own," Ridge said finally, voice rough as weathered leather. "Voss gets a safe house if needed, and we ride point, eyes open, no lone wolves." The group nodded, the bond coalescing like molten iron cooling into strength. Sparks cross-referenced the files, uncovering more. A pattern of displaced families, their stories mirroring the Lavoys, homes flipped for condos that stood empty, profits funneled to Tate's allies. One name surfaced repeatedly, a notary who'd rubber-stamped the deals, now retired but reachable, his conscience perhaps as frayed as the papers. "Tomorrow," Spark said, saving the compilation to an encrypted drive. "We reach him. Quiet meet, like with Voss." The clock on the wall ticked past midnight, the room's warmth a bulwark against the chill seeping through cracks, carrying hints of impending rain. As the crew dispersed, Forge checking locks, Mira settling Armand and Vera with blankets soft as old promises, Ridge stepped outside alone, the gravel cool under his boots. The moon silvered the lot, stars pricking the velvet sky like distant witnesses. The wind picked up, rustling leaves with the scent of wet earth, a sensory prelude to the storm brewing. The alley's secret had evolved into this, a symphony of quiet defiance against corruption's hush. But the cruiser's shadow loomed, a psychological prod reminding him that justice's path twisted, testing resolve at every turn. In the silence, Ridge recommitted, the promise to his brother a steady flame. For the overlooked, for the chosen kin, he'd ride into the fray, unraveling lies with the patient fury of truth unveiled. Dawn waited, heavy with possibility, as suspense coiled tighter, drawing them toward the reckoning's heart. Dawn broke over Milford with a reluctant glow, the sun's first rays slicing through the pines like hesitant fingers, illuminating the clubhouse lot where bikes stood sentinel in the dew-kissed gravel. The air carried the fresh bite of overnight rain, mingled with the earthy scent of damp soil and lingering pine resin, a cleansing breath after the night's coiled suspense. Ridge had barely slept, his mind replaying the cruiser's headlights, the USB's secrets, and the fragile hope in Armand and Vera's eyes. Now, as the crew gathered in the main room, the space felt alive with purpose, coffee brewing strong and black, its aroma cutting through the faint must of old maps pinned to the walls. The encrypted drive sat on the table like a loaded chamber, its contents an arsenal of truth. Voss's audio, digital trails, witness notes woven into an unbreakable chain. Forge spread the compiled dossier across the scarred wood, pages rustling like whispers of impending storm. His voice rumbled low, steady as an engine at idle. "This goes to Judge Harlan, retired but clean, out in the next county, no ties to Tate's web. We deliver it personal, no mail, no traces." Echo nodded, his quiet demeanor masking the fire kindled by his father's echoed fate, while Mira reviewed the medical tie-ins one last time, her fingers tracing charts that documented not just ailments, but the invisible scars of coercion. Sparks had fortified the files with timestamps and cross-references, her eyes sharp despite the fatigue etching lines around them. Armand and Vera stood nearby, the couple's frailty offset by a newfound steel, Vera's shawl draped like a banner, Armand's hand firm on her shoulder. "You've given us more than papers," Armand said, his northern lilt carrying gratitude thick as morning mist. "You've given us voice." Ridge felt the weight settle deeper, the old promise to his brother a pulse in his veins. Honor the silent, mend the broken with actions quieter than thunder. This was the moral crux, not a raid or roar, but a deliberate unveiling, justice poetic in its patience. Yet the psychological toll gnawed, the risk to Ilara's family, the backlash that could paint the club as vigilantes in a town primed to protect its own. He'd stared down worse in shadowed deployments, where loyalty meant choosing the hard right over the easy wrong. But here, with chosen kin at stake, the dilemma sharpened like a blade on bone. "We ride together," he said, voice gravel rough, sealing the pact. The crew mounted up, engines growling awake in unison, the vibration thrumming through leather and resolve as they pulled out, a convoy cutting through the waking streets. The road to Judge Harlan's cabin wound through mist-shrouded hills, the Harleys leaning into curves with the precision of old friends, wind-whipping scents of wild sage and wet asphalt. Ridge led, Armand and Vera secured in a sidecar rigged hasty but sure, their faces turned to the passing pines, echoes of the home stolen, now reclaimed in motion. Behind, the crew formed a protective wedge. Forge's bulk a rear guard, eyes scanning mirrors for tails. The sheriff's cruiser haunted the periphery, a psychological shadow, but no lights flashed, no sirens wailed. Perhaps the web sensed the shift, truths too solid to smother quietly. Tension built in the miles, ethical suspense coiling, exposed the corruption and ripples could flood innocent lives, but silence it. And the poison spread unchecked. They arrived at the cabin as the sun climbed higher, its light gilding the weathered porch where Judge Harlan waited. A man in his 70s, with a face carved by decades on the bench, eyes keen behind wire-rimmed glasses. The air here smelled of cedar and fresh split wood, a sanctuary removed from Milford's undercurrents. No formalities. Ridge dismounted first, handing over the dossier with a nod that carried the weight of unspoken oaths. "For the Lavoys, for the pattern," he said simply. Harlan flipped through the pages under the porch's overhang, the rustle amplified in the hush, his brow furrowing at the audio's veiled threats, the notarized deceptions, the medical logs painting coercion in clinical strokes. Armand stepped forward, voice steady. "We signed in trust, sir. They twisted it to chains." The judge closed the file, his gaze sweeping the group. Bikers etched with road-worn scars, the elderly couple standing tall in borrowed strength. "I've seen Tate's kind before," he murmured, voice resonant with the authority of cases long closed. "Power that whispers until it screams. This holds. I'll convene a special hearing. Pull in the AG's office. Outside influences, clean slate, but expect pushback. Corruption fights dirty when cornered." Vera's eyes met his, a tear tracing a path down her cheek, not of sorrow, but release. The first crack in years of quiet endurance. Mira placed a gentle hand on her arm, the chosen family's warmth a silent vow. "We'd ride through fire for this." Back on the road, the return felt lighter, the engine's roar a triumphant undercurrent, though caution lingered like exhaust in the air. Word spread subtle through the crew's network. Ilara relocated to a safe spot, her daughter shielded, a quiet thank you relayed via burner phone. Tate's web unraveled in the days that followed. Headlines in the regional paper, fictional but fierce. Elderly scams exposed. Holding scheme crumbles, with the judge's hearing pulling threads loose. Notaries recanted, filings reversed, the hillside homes returned to owners who'd thought them lost forever. No violence marred the victory. Justice came through proofs and witnesses, the moral poetry of integrity prevailing over institutional rot. Weeks later, under a harvest moon that silvered the reclaimed garden, Armand and Vera stood on their porch, the scent of fresh-turned soil and baking bread wafting like redemption's embrace. Ridge and the crew gathered loose, bikes parked in the drive like honored guests, the air alive with laughter and the low hum of shared stories. Forge clapped Armand on the back. Echo shared a quiet nod with Vera. Sparks tinkered with a porch light as Mira checked in with gentle questions. The old promise fulfilled, not just for the Lavoys, but for the ghosts Ridge carried, his brother's whisper finally at peace in the honor kept. As the moon climbed, Ridge lingered on the hill's edge, the valley below stretching dark and vast, lights of Milford twinkling like stars grounded. The ride had mended fractures, personal scars softened, loyalties deepened, a legacy of sacrifice etched in the chosen bonds that outlasted blood. Corruption's shadow retreated, not slain but exposed, a testament that quiet courage reshaped worlds. The wind carried the faint rumble of distant roads, calling onward, but for now, in this moment of poetic justice, Ridge breathed free, the overlooked honored, the silent heard, promises enduring like the hills themselves. Thank you for riding this journey with us. If these stories of honor and redemption touch your heart, subscribe for more tales from the road.